that volume down some. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Mark Gittleman. I'm the chair of the ISS User Advisory Committee, and this is our annual meeting. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. You just heard the automated voice. This is going to be recorded. We do have a number of people online. If you want to speak, if you want to ask a question, please type it into the Zoom chat. It's really the only way because you're muted. And Robbie will be monitoring that. And with that, I think I will we've got a few people trickling in, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. Here's our agenda. I don't know that we'll need all 2 hours. It depends on the questions and discussion as we go. I'm going to take about 10 minutes to give you an update on the year, the UAC's year. And then we're fortunate to have Robin Gatens from headquarters who's going to talk to us for about 20 minutes about plans. Robbie Hampton from the National Lab is going to update everybody on a new process, payload prioritization process. Ray's going to talk about the outlook for the next 5 years. We solicited questions, anonymous questions from the User Advisory Committee, all of its members, which we've compiled, and Ray, or maybe Ray and I will, and Robin perhaps also will endeavor to answer those. And then at the end, I'm going to encourage and maybe beg a little bit to get everybody to participate in the UAC. I think we've had a very good year, and participation is well worthwhile. So I would like to start with this. I also need to adjust my screen a little bit. This is the current composition of the UAC. So you can see we have a lot of people, which is great, organized in 5 subcommittees. And I want to take a moment and thank everybody. We have 5 subcommittee chairs, and I didn't count, but I think it's over 30 participants. Science subcommittee, Amir Hirsa, who is here. There he is. Could you just stand up and wave at everybody? Thank you. I'm not a G-man. I'm a G-man. I'm a U. Oh, you are. Shoot. Okay. Oh. Yeah, right. He's a U-man. We have Nicole Rensselaer Polytechnic. We have Nicole Wagner here from Lamb Division, and there she is, chairing our Applied R&D subcommittee. Henry Hansen, who's very active, but he travels more than anybody I think I know, is from Adidas, and he's, I'm sure, online. Our Tech Dev subcommittee. We have our STEM Education and Workforce subcommittee, which is Ilana Rea, who is online. I saw her. And then we have Rich Bowling from Redwire, who chairs our commercial service provider subcommittee. Rich is rolling off at the end of the year, and our friend Twyman Clements is going to step in and chair that subcommittee for us. I'd also like to thank Ron Joslin, going back to our science subcommittee. Ron chaired that subcommittee from its inception until just a couple months ago. and he did yeoman work. And if you know what he did, you appreciate what he did. So this is our subcommittee. You see a lot of our committee, you see a lot of familiar names on there. It's not a lot of work typically, but we do get a lot done, or we can when we put our minds to it. So our focus this year was to bring the user committee, the ISS user committee, together. The UAC chair, me, and our subcommittee chairs had been meeting about quarterly previous to this, maybe even a little bit less. We decided to meet once a month, which we've done very consistently. Each of the subcommittees meets at least quarterly. Some of them meet monthly. I'll show you the schedule at the end for next year. We started off with a focus on bringing everybody together and helping everybody understand our interdependence with one another. As Ray Lugo, the CEO of CASIS and National Lab, told me last year when he was talking me into this, the researchers and the service providers and the implementation partners don't always seem to understand how much they need each other. So we started off with that, and that's an easy sell. But I think we did a good job in the meantime, coming to appreciate how much everybody brings to the party, how much we really do need each other, and the importance of the work that we all do. For better or worse, the year was quickly consumed with the need to advocate for access to the ISS for the work that we all do, for the health of the national lab, and in support of the LEO economy. So as many, maybe all of you know, the initial plans, the president's budget request, for example, would have essentially yielded zero access to the space station. And in my mind, at least, all this would have just gone away. And it was in the process of going away. And we jumped in and we did some good, and that's what I'm going to talk about next. The other thing that we did at Ray's request, because in our charter, it's very explicit, we exist to advise the CEO of the National Lab. And so when Ray asks a question, it's our job to try to answer it. And he doesn't ask us any easy questions. So it did take a little time, but I think in the end we came up with something useful, and they're implementing it. And that's what Robbie's going to talk about. So I have just a slide here, and I'm not going to read it to you. But through our efforts, the subcommittee chairs, the active members of the subcommittees themselves, and others, including a Boeing-led effort, Barry Houston Economic Partnership. We got some op-eds and white papers authored and published and distributed and read. Some of them are listed there. There may be others. In the summer, we went to DC. We met with individual office holders. We met with their staff. We hosted panels that were really very well attended for the different subcommittees in both houses, both chambers. And then we repeated those at the Ascend conference in July in Las Vegas. And I think between all of that, we had a workshop in Houston that was also very well attended, including by Texas elected officials who were very much on our side and also helped us. And of course, we weren't the only ones working on all this stuff, but I very much believe that our efforts had an effect. And I'm sure you've all been following this closely also. The Budget Reconciliation Bill, otherwise known as whatever the 3B stand for, big, beautiful bill. It included some plus-ups for us. Again, I'm not going to read this to you, but the immediate result of all this good stuff being added back in and the markups coming out of the committees was 3 more ISS resupply missions and the reopening of the ISS National Lab resource request process, which they had suspended earlier this year. Now, I always point out this is going to be, I think, a never-ending battle, struggle for the rest of the space station's life. And we did some good in the first round. There's more rounds to come. But thank you to everybody that participated and helped and worked on doing this. We made a difference, and that's how it's supposed to work. Totally changing topics. This is our calendar of events for the coming year. We will the ISS R&D conference is kind of joining forces with the Ascend conference, and I don't know what the whole program is going to look like, but it's very likely that we will have a UAC meeting at Ascend, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. And then we'll probably also do a second, if we can, at the ASGSR approximately this time next year. There's typically a UAC kickoff meeting in January. Is it February this year?
Yeah, I think it's going to be in that time.
Yeah, so early in the year. We haven't talked about it, but I assume that the UAC core committee, the 5 subcommittee chairs and myself with our NASA and National Lab observers will keep meeting monthly. And then you can see the different subcommittees and their cadence. I left off Lori Proven. How could I do that? Without whom the wheels would come off. So, Lori, if you're on listening, thank you for everything that you do. Do you want to say something, Ray?
No, I'm good.
You're good. Okay. Yeah. So this is where I say, if you're not on one of these subcommittees, you should be. It's not a big task of your time. The quarterlies, we're talking an hour every 3 months, unless there's something specific that we are asked to do. Even the monthlies, it's an hour a month. It's really not a lot, but you can have a big impact. Okay, I think I have a minute to see if there are any questions. Perfect. If you think of something, I'll be around. Which brings us back to here. So next up is Robin Gatens. For those of you who don't know, she's NASA's director of the International Space Station and acting director of the Commercial Spaceflight Division, and she is also a friend of the ISS Users Committee. User Community. All we had to do was ask, and she said, sure, happy to join you guys. Robin, we're grateful that you could, and thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark. Sorry, I can't. In Houston, and I really appreciate the efforts of you, Mark, and the whole committee. You've done great work, and I'm going to talk a little bit about just kind of where we've been and where we're going for a few minutes here. One of my many hats as well is if you're not aware, is as the NASA liaison for the ISS National Lab. And so I really, we've spent a lot of time with cases and the community, and here in the room with me is, being quiet, is Missy Gard and Christy Duplichin, who's going to be taking over when Missy retires in a couple of weeks at the end of this month. And so together on the NASA side, I don't know if Christy Cox is in the room. She works for me. But we are very, very supportive of the work that this community is doing. You guys really represent the backbone of why we're continuing our work in low Earth orbit. It's all about the research, and this research that continues to accelerate more and more and deliver benefits to humankind, support the LEO economy. And so the work you're doing is critically important to all of our plans now and in the future in low Earth orbit. In 2025, we just got a chance to review the end of the year metrics with CASIS. And once again, this community has delivered and made good use of the ISS National Lab resources in a huge way. Just to call out some of the things that kind of stuck out to us as highlights, and Ray may talk more about these. The number of proposals that we're seeing coming in and the quality of those projects has continued to increase. You know, back when we first started, struggling to fill the pipeline, and now, gosh, you know, the line's out the door of just, and it's honestly hard to accommodate all of the high impact potential research that you guys are bringing forward. 115 payloads delivered, which is an incredibly high number, and 80% of those use commercial facilities on station. So I don't think the larger community really understands, you know, how commercial this effort is. Even the NASA projects and the other government agency projects, on how much we use the commercial facilities. The percentage of completed projects that met objectives remains really high at 83%. And that's an incredible, speaks to how good we've gotten at doing research on station, right? We're getting the results we're looking for. We're getting the outcomes from the science and achieving our objectives with the research. So you can be really proud of that. The amount of money that's coming in externally is also continues to grow. The funds raised by startups post-award and post-flight is around $250 million and continues to grow. 73 papers published and 13 new patents. So all of that just really speaks to the impact and the quality of the work. And I think we can all be proud of those results. And I think you'll see some of this reflected in the Kansas annual report that will be coming out. But I just wanted to congratulate you all on this work from our NASA perspective. This is truly the decade of results because of your work. The space station continued to have to be resilient this year. 25 years of continuous presence is a remarkable accomplishment, and the program makes it appear easy, but as we all know, it's not easy. And there are a number of challenges, whether they be technical challenges or schedule challenges or budget challenges. And we certainly had our share of those challenges come at us this year. Mark, you spoke to the budget advocacy. Just to share from the NASA perspective, we found ourselves in this position due to a cumulative multi-year budget shortfall. It wasn't a single year. It wasn't, it's just year over year, less appropriated funds than we have requested, along with the addition of the USD orbit vehicle into the budget. Gave us a pretty big shortfall challenge. And on top of that, we had some delays with our cargo transportation vehicles and with the loss of, or the damage incurred by the NG-22 vehicle. We lost that out of the fleet. We'll get it back later, but that did impact us, and delays with other planned vehicles. So out of all that, the program's been working really hard to look across and find efficiencies and try to optimize, adjust operations where we can, and try to find a way forward that really continues to get all we can out of the resources that we have for the program. And I appreciate y'all's patience in bearing with us through that. I think we have a good path forward, and it's designed to really try to put all the resources we possibly can into the science and the research and gain efficiencies elsewhere. So we're making progress to ensure we maximize and optimize that research throughput for the remainder of the ISS operational life. Fortunately, this fall, we had successful cargo missions, SpaceX 33, NG-23, and then the first launch of JAXA's HTV-X1. So we needed all those. And so flying all of those successfully let us replenish on-orbit supplies for the station. So with fewer cargo missions and more stretched out, we really have to keep a high level of reserves on board station to ensure that if we have a delay or a failure in one of those vehicles, we aren't in the position where we have to decrew. Unfortunately, what that means is in order to replenish those critical spares and consumables, we have to prioritize those over science. And you guys have to bear waiting for us to do that. But now that we've done that, we're in a good spot. And so this point going forward, we're carefully managing that and trying to maintain those reserve levels from this point forward so that we can keep that 25-year streak going. And it's not just important to say, you know, we've kept the streak going, but it's critically important for the safety of ISS. We can't decrew the station and operate safely. So we'll keep trying to optimize the research throughput, as I said, for the remaining years on ISS, but we have growing demand, which is a great problem to have. We know you're anxious to get your research on board, and we know that you're bringing more research to the table. And so we have to come up with a better way to prioritize which projects fly on what missions. And Robbie's going to be talking about that in the next agenda item. And we really appreciate what the UAC fed in to CASIS as input on that. We have reviewed that with CASIS, and we don't tell them how to do it, but NASA does support what CASIS along with the UAC has come up with for this new prioritization process. And we believe it aligns with overall priorities to maximize the value of ISS resources. So I know there'll be more discussion on it, but just wanted to say that we appreciate all the work that's been done to come up with the process. And going forward, it may have to be tweaked, probably will, but encourage you all to give it a chance and try it out. While we continue to do all we can on the ISS, we're also planning for our transition in utilization to other LEO platforms. And so I know that as you're seeing the 2030 looming out there and wondering when you're going to have another platform to go to, we're hoping to have capable CLDs to accommodate the research starting at the end of the decade. Even now, there are new and emerging commercial platforms that can accommodate some percentage of projects, particularly the ones that can be operated autonomously without crew. And so NASA, my mission directorate, SOMD, along with the Space Technology Mission Directorate, which manages flight opportunities, the Flight Opportunities Program, have begun discussing how to use those mechanisms to potentially accommodate some projects. Having the mechanisms is one thing, but will still require budget for the flights. So we're looking at ways that maybe we can partner with other agencies or private investment to try to enable some flights on other platforms, and that can be flown and may not require flights to the ISS, and help us through this transition. So it's exciting for me to see the progress that's been made in other sources of funding for research and integration costs besides the NASA budgets. In starting out, NASA would pretty much fund the research, the integration costs, and the flight. And now we're at the point where a lot of the research and even the integration costs are being covered by other external sources. And so that is a great trend. Budget for the flights themselves is the largest remaining challenge that we have. So my challenge to you all is an invitation is let's come together as a community and try to help brainstorm solutions to that. I think we could partner between government and this private community to maybe enable us to be creative and use some of these other mechanisms. So I'm anxious, if I were to give a marching order to you, Mark, and the team, is maybe that's your next challenge. Finally, as I close my time, I just want to say that the NASA CASES partnership has never been stronger. We're committed to doing all we can to support this community through the transition. And with that, I am pleased to announce that NASA has extended its cooperative agreement with CASES through 2030 to keep managing scientific resources for the U.S. segment of the station. The extension has been in work for a while, and we finally got it signed. And this will allow us to maximize the value of the nation's investment in the space station, as well as demonstrate the scientific and technological productivity of the ISS. We're using station to benefit life here on Earth, grow this commercial economy in low Earth orbit, and prepare for human exploration beyond low Earth orbit to the Moon and Mars. So really proud that that we will have a continuity in the ISS National Lab as long as we have the ISS through the end of the decade. So with that, please continue to feed your ideas through the UAC. This is an incredibly effective avenue to make your collective voices heard, and your voices are very, very important to us. Also, keep up the exciting work that you're doing and tell us about it. We love, love, love to hear about your results. We're eager to share them and spread the word. So we want to celebrate your successes as well as help figure out solutions to the challenges. So please continue to do that. Let us know how we can help, and we're here to cheer you on. So with that, that ends what I had planned. Back over to you, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah. Robbie is fielding questions in the chat. We probably have time. We're right on schedule. We have time maybe for one question from the audience, if there are any. Oh, they're going to let you off easy, Robin.
Saving them all for Robbie.
Yeah. Hey, thank you again for joining us. Really appreciate it.
I'll stay on in case someone, has something for you later. We plan to listen in. So,
Robin, we did have one question that you might be able to help us with. Have we explored the ways to resolve our temporary financial challenges through our international partnerships?
Say more? Because
I think the question revolves around, are we utilizing our international partnerships to address any budget shortfalls to help us maintain our throughput?
Yeah, in fact, I can speak directly to that. The ESA Ministerial was held last week, and as part of one facet of what was approved was, well, I guess everybody in this community is probably pretty familiar with the station barter system, or what's called common system operating cost. So nobody pays, right? But everybody contributes and then gets flight opportunities and a chance to send their science up to station. So with ESA, in order to reach agreement on that, those puts and takes for the remainder of station, what ended up happening, and because we were short on cargo and everything, we were cargo constrained. One of their contributions is going to be towards that cargo. So they approved funds that will go towards cargo flight to station. Well, multiple cargo flights to station. One will be from a U.S. provider, and then they're planning to fly the new ESA cargo system that they're developing to station before the end of the decade. So yes, we're getting contributions. JAXA just flew their HTVX. That's the same thing. It's cargo to station, and that's their contribution. So it's not money, but it's valuable cargo missions to station.
All right. Let me do some computer navigating here. All right. Let's see if I can keep us on schedule. All right. So thanks everybody for being here. It was great to hear from Robin on the future of NASA and the ISS, as well as the research community. She did a little plug for me. So my talk here today is to describe to you the process that we went through to update the ISS National Labs prioritization process. So we've arrived at a new kind of paradigm, I should say. And with that came the need to think about the way we prioritized what research was happening on ISS. So I wanted to walk everybody through that so everybody understands where we're at today. Oops, I'm not ending the slideshow. Just going to the next page. Oh, you must be in the other chart set. Other file. All right. Threw a curveball on me there, Mark. Got that. Now I'm going to get the zoom back. Stop sharing. All right. Wish I had two screens. Okay, here we go. Finally found it. All right. So where we are today. All right. So, as everybody's aware, and what we just talked about, we had a few budget challenges this year. And it kind of forced us into a new paradigm for the research community. So with the budget cuts, one of the largest levers that NASA had to pull to save money was to reduce the cargo flight services. So, that meant that all of the cargo capacity that was going to ISS, more of that was going to be diverted to consumables and resources to keep the vehicle alive versus research. And so if we were going to be operating in a constrained environment on the upmass side, we wanted to rethink the way we were prioritizing payloads. We no longer had what I would say the fat and happy years where we had plenty of cargo space to go around and could fly almost anything. So we took a look at what we were doing to prioritize our research and felt there was opportunity for change there. So we enlisted the help of the UAC and some others internally to take a look at what we could do to change the way we do business. So when I talked about those budget challenges, what that really meant was you see these blue bars here on the left of the chart, and that's kind of where we were operating. We were getting roughly 1,500 kilograms of upmass every year to the ISS to support ISS National Lab payloads. So if you doubled that, you would get what NASA and the ISS National Lab got together. You add on a tick more, and that's what the total community was getting. But with the new reduction in cargo vehicles that we were expecting to see based on the president's budget request, we were looking at something more along the lines of where that green bar is on the right there, which is only about 400 kilograms a year to support payloads. Not really a whole lot you can do with that. It was basically going to consume our entire backlog of research, and we wouldn't be able to take on new projects, which is what led us to the pause in the RRF process that Mark spoke of earlier. Thankfully, though, with the big beautiful bill augmentation, ISS program was able to raid the coffers and find some additional funds elsewhere. They are making plans to buy more cargo vehicles. So we're looking not at the state that we were in, but a better state than what it could have been. So we're projecting somewhere between 700 to 1,000 kilograms every year to support research. So it's not where we were, but it's better than what we were all fearing. So, taking that into consideration, like with the, constrained up mass, how do we prioritize moving forward? Who gets to utilize that precious up mass? So this is kind of the steps we took. First, we identified, what criteria we wanted in an updated prioritization process. We enlisted the help of the UAC through Mark and the team to help us come up with a community-driven process, that hit all of the points that they were concerned about. We looked at a few different options internally as well. We've evaluated those against the criteria. And then we arrived at a modified version of what we got back from the UAC. So I'll kind of walk you through all that a little bit here real quick. And then we'll have room for questions at the end. So what criteria were we looking for in a process? So we wanted something that could integrate our whole portfolio, no matter where the projects came from, what their source was, the fundamental science, the applied research, the commercially based research, coming from our CSPs, the workforce development payloads. We wanted something that was clear and simple and easy to communicate and understand. It prioritized science and technology that would move the needle in a given field or industry to take advantage of what time we have left on ISS. It prioritized operationally feasible projects that maximized our bang for our buck when it came to our resources. We did our best to minimize the subjectiveness of the categories. And we wanted to provide clarity to the community so they could plan their businesses around it. So after we had established some criteria, we looked at these various approaches. So we looked at just maintaining what we're doing today, the UAC recommended approach, tiered approach, looking more at it from a national priorities perspective, a weighted scoring system based on factors, kind of more dynamic process. It was kind of what's the hot button today, kind of a way of doing business, just direct stakeholder engagement. So setting up meetings and getting everybody's input, which turns out would take quite a lot of time and effort on everybody's part. And then kind of a tiered scorecard, which was looking at kind of combining 2 and 3 there. So we brought some brains in to really help the situation. Dr. Ryan Reeves from our science team took a scientific method approach and developed this table for us. And we kind of looked at, which approaches were nailing our criteria. So you can see the tiered model, the weighted scoring, and the tiered scorecard all scored very well, as well as what we were doing today, which, to be honest, was a little bit shocking. But what we ended up arriving at was a blend of kind of those top elements. A little bit of what we're doing today. We tried to incorporate as many of the elements that we got back from the UAC as we could. And it ended up kind of being a tiered approach where we were looking at the merit and impact of the science. We were looking at the feasibility of the project, as well as some business considerations. So we combined all those things, and we ended up with a new scorecard. Kind of condensed it here to throw it on one slide. But we ended up with 13 criteria to score research against. With the merit and impact being 5 categories that look at investment made in the project, the commercial opportunity, both from a market size and a time to market, as well as projected outcomes. And all these things kind of looking to pick up on all the different aspects that the various flavors of research we have. So we have fundamental research that's going to really drive our publications. We're going to have applied research that's going to drive our patents or products or the commercial market stuff. And then we have, direct kind of market projects on the tech dev side. So we wanted to hit all of those different arenas and different lenses that you can look at a research project from. And then we went into feasibility. So how much resources does a project require, from upmass, crew time, conditioned storage resources, which are severely limited as well. And we looked at what facilities they were needing. We have some facilities on orbit that are highly constrained. They're very popular. I think some of you in here are very well aware of that. And then we looked at complexity. Is this something easy to accomplish? Is this something brand new we've never done before? Are we going to be able to accomplish this and get good results from it? And then we looked at some business considerations, which are giving the CSPs an opportunity to upvote kind of some projects that are important to their business. If a payload was targeting a flight and was unable to be accommodated due to lack of resources, not due to lack of readiness, you could get extra points for that. And, is your project fully funded, or is it still need additional funding to execute that project, as a consideration that we're now looking at? Are you building on previously met objectives? So you've done research before, you had good results on orbit, and now you've learned something and you want to apply that knowledge to the next payload. And then finally, if there is a workforce development element to your payload, you get bonus points for that. And part of, bringing the brains to the operation, Ryan took a look at what this new approach would do to our existing portfolio compared to the old process and the new process. So that trend line you see down the middle would represent no change in where your prioritization would fall. And about 50% of the portfolio, the existing portfolio, fell within, say, 5 points of their current priority under our old system. So that's a good sign that a majority of our projects weren't going to feel a huge impact. Where we saw the bigger impact was our Igniting Innovation work, which I think many of you are familiar with. This was a large investment, not only on our part, but on investigators' parts, where they'd bring matching funds. It was more on the applied nature, which the new process takes into consideration as far as commercial market and opportunity goes. We saw a big jump in those projects. There was only 2 of them, so our sample size was pretty small, but it wasn't completely unexpected. But I do want to point out that we did see a jump in the priorities for our RRFs, which are going to be our new way of bringing in business for the most part. We're expecting that a good majority of any new research being sponsored by the ISS National Lab will come in via the RRF process. And so it was a good sign that we could see that projects coming in this way could climb up in priority. So that was good to see.
I mean, we're actually thinking it's going to be 100%, right?
It's quite possible, yeah. So 100%. There's still, a slight chance that somebody finds some money and allows us to run some solicitations again. So, well, how's this all going to work in process, implementation of it? The big thing I want to point out is the priority process is separate from the award process. So think of it like this. If we award a project, we are releasing our resources to the project. And the priority helps us determine when that project will fly. The priority score will be determined after award, regardless of the source. So they're not dependent on one another. And a low priority score does not necessarily mean you won't fly. It's still very highly dependent on what resources that particular payload needs. You know, if it's soft stow or needs a big bag or needs conditioned stowage, all those things still have, you know, their own constraints. You know, that being said, our resources are still limited. We plan to continue to award projects via the RRF process as long as we believe we have resources to support them. Should the time come when we believe we've exhausted all of our resources, you know, through the life of the program, you know, we'll convene again and say, hey, it's time to pull the plug on new awards or direct them to an alternative platform. And one thing we did get throughout the process was a request to provide the score back to CSPs. Yeah, after we've run through this a couple of times now on the portfolio, and the scores, you know, separate themselves, but not as much as you might think. So a point here or there isn't going to make much of a difference in the grand priority of the payload as far as being accommodated or not. And we didn't want to bog ourselves down in discussions over 1 point in a category here or there. We felt it was best to provide an adjectival score back to the CSPs. So our plan is that once we've established a priority for a payload for a given flight, that we will communicate those results back to the CSPs via a high, medium, or low score. So we're currently going through this process right now. First trial run with SpaceX 34. We've just about completed our scoring process, and we'll be communicating the adjectival scores back to the CSPs. And also, as always, we will continue to work with the CSPs. If something isn't accommodated, they feel it needs to be accommodated, we're still allowing folks to horse trade within their accommodated resources. All right. Kind of in a flow chart for those of you that like flow charts, how it's going to work. So the first things first, a payload has to be approved through you know, one of our existing processes, whether that's through one of our previous solicitations or the RRF process. Once that's, you know, awarded, it gets added to our RUPS database that we maintain in-house. And from there, we will determine an initial priority score. I say initial because if you're bumped, your priority score might change. And so we wanted to take that into account, as well as a CSP's priorities may change from flight to flight. So a score change could happen there as well. So when we do get a call from OZ for flight candidates through their new EPL process, we will score all of our payloads targeting that mission, update the priorities based on CSP priority, as well as if the payload had been previously bumped, rack and stack based on that scoring system, communicate the results back to the CSPs, work through the accommodations process like we've always done. And then if you're accommodated, you're on to flight. And if not, you're back in the queue for the next one. So that is the end of my charts on this process. We want to do questions now, Mark, or do you want to wait till the end?
Well, you still have several minutes.
I still have several minutes? Oh, man. Okay. All right. Well, we can open it up for questions here in the room first. If anybody has questions about this. I do want to say it was when we entered this process of kind of iterating on the way we're going to do business, it was a little nerve-wracking for me, wondering how much pushback we were going to get along the way. And it was really great to see the community come together. The UAC, I think, did a yeoman's job putting together a proposal that we could really run with. And it made things really easy to get through and take that to the next level.
Do you have a rough estimate of what percentage of payloads are decreased as a result of the prioritizations?
What do you mean by that decrease?
Like how many are not going to be able to be blown up?
You mean on the next flight?
Yeah, on the next.
It's the same as it always has been. We usually have more requests for a flight than we can accommodate. So that number I don't think is going to change.
And particularly given that we've been kind of in a pause here for a while, so that number might be bigger for this flight than it would be for a subsequent one.
So, and we do our best too to communicate what our expectations are up front too. So if somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I want to fly on the next flight," be like, we're extremely oversubscribed for that flight. Your chances are low unless you want to make that your number one priority. So, Mark.
Robin mentioned it. You may have mentioned it too. This is the first version of this.
Yes.
Right.
How would you like people to get feedback to you if they have any as we go?
I would anytime, phone call, email. Just don't show up at my door. You show up in my office though. It's 4 South. It's behind a gate. It's really great.
I can tell you where.
Just down the hall from Ryan.
I mean, we need to look at this after we've had a chance to run through it once or twice, because to get it exactly right on the first iteration, but I'll just say it flat out. We're very open, taking a hard look at it, and making any changes that are needed to make it work right for the community. But I think, it looks on paper to be something that's going to work. And I think what we're really talking about is where the tweaks that are going to make it work better.
Yeah.
Don't hesitate providing feedback.
Yeah, I just want to go back to your question real quick. I think the bigger impact for what won't fly on a flight is how many flights we can procure. I don't think it's going to be the process. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and like I said before, we're planning to continue to award projects as long as we have resources to support them. Assuming the resources are there, it's just a matter of not if you're going to fly, it's when. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So we may not be when you want to, but we're going to get you there if we awarded you. It's our plan.
Yeah, Robbie, thank you for walking us through the scoring system. CASIS is always loosely defined. Its capacity is half of the FMAS and half of the astronauts. Is that still hold true today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the NASA time and not mass, right? So if you go back to my first chart here, this graph kind of represents the circle pie chart here kind of represents that the two halves plus the international component. So
that's not exactly right. It's not half wall. It's half a wall that's left over after the crew and vehicle have taken care of. Which is why if it goes to 3, the half remaining goes to about
That little green line.
Yeah.
right.
With some exception, we have put research above spares and consumables, and we will whenever we can. As a program, that's what we push to do. It's been, as we talked about earlier, and Robin talked about it, it's been a really, really rough year. Not knowing exactly how many vehicles we're going to have for the next 5 years impacts the amount of stockpile we have to put on these early flights to keep us crewed later. And so it's this constant balance game.
Yeah. And, I hope we've done a good job of this over the years, but, we try to communicate when RFs are submitted, what we think we can accomplish, what we can't. We're going to continue to do that. We've been flexible, I think, over the years on working with folks to try to find creative solutions to get, what we can up there. None of that's going to change. So, we might have a slightly different process in how we prioritize payloads, but we're still going to fly as much as we can, try to find creative solutions when possible, and continue to beat on Ryan's desk to let us fly more. So,
I'd like to ask one question in concern of space research and development entities. How does NASA categorize among ISSNL, ASGSR, and even safety?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last part. You said, how does NASA characterize the ISS National Lab, ASGSR?
Research and development agendas between ASGSR, ISSNL, and Safety Institute.
In the SETI Institute. Okay, so how do those all categories? I believe the short answer is NASA and the research office are agnostic to where the research comes from and what institute, right? Each one of those institutes will flow through a sponsor that can sponsor research on ISS, and those sponsors are responsible for the prioritization of their own payloads. So ISS National Lab will prioritize payloads based on that process I just walked through. But like BPS, which many ASGSR researchers flow up through, will have their own process for prioritizing payloads, which would be separate from ours. It really depends on who your sponsor is at the end of the day on how that research will be categorized and prioritized.
All right. Hey, thank you, Robbie.
Mm-hmm.
And next up, we have the head of the ISS National Lab himself, Mr. Ray Lugo.
Thank you much, Mark. So I don't know, is Missy Guard on the phone today? Okay, because if she is, one thing I'd like to encourage folks in this room and people who aren't in this room is make sure you reach out to Missy and wish her the best in her retirement. She has done an incredible job for the National Lab and this group of people. So, I think we're deeply indebted to her, and we've got a good replacement coming our way. But I know I'm going to miss Missy, and I think y'all will too. So, okay. So, as much as everybody wants to believe that this year is an anomaly, I'm going to argue that this year may become more the norm than the anomaly. So let me press forward. So it was a challenging year. When we say it was a challenging year from budget, clearly the ISS program had a number of budget challenges, and we were included in helping resolve that. The allocation is also a part of the resource constraints we live with, and crew time. So, it's our resources went from probably being barely enough to very, very severely constrained. And so it's, this prioritization process is really more about trying to make sure we squeeze as much juice out of this animal as we can. And it was incredibly important to get this community's input on that. I would have not been happy if we'd had to try to develop this on our own and roll it out to this group. I think it was incredibly important that we heard from the entire community, the commercial service providers, the research community. I think it was incredibly important to hear from them, and I think it was a great effort on their part. So this year we canceled a number of solicitations. We had previously been running, I think we got it down to 3 solicitations: tech dev, in space, manufacturing, and we had planned a igniting innovation 2 that we didn't do. We obviously paused the acceptance of RRFs for a period of time. We've ceased the STEM activities. And before anybody thinks this was something that NASA directed us to do, I really want to make clear this was really an administration change in priorities. And I can tell you that the NASA team was just as, upset about what we had to do with STEM. And I've challenged the STEM committee to come up with some creative ways of how we can continue to inspire the next generation in spite of having much less to offer with respect to STEM activities. We had a significant staff reduction at CASIS, and then we obviously canceled ISS R&D. But again, we were able to turn that into something positive. We're working with AIAA and the Commercial Spaceflight Federation, and we're joining the Ascend conference. We actually participated in 25, and we're planning to participate with that conference through the end of life of the ISS and obviously the National Lab. So in spite of all the negatives, we still had some very positive results. I think it was mentioned that we delivered 115 payloads, which was a significant number of projects that we delivered this year. 80% of those payloads were from commercial entities, which is critically important because what we're hoping to do is build this low Earth orbit economy, and that's going to be really important as we move forward into the commercial LEO destination timeframe. We ran our first accelerator program, and we picked 6 small companies as the inaugural cohort. I was actually at their demo day about 2 weeks ago in San Francisco, and I can share with you a lot of energy in the room and a lot of excitement by the venture capitalists. And we're working very closely with NASA to see if we can't do another accelerator in 2026. We had 80 peer-reviewed articles, which was a record number. We raised about another $250 million of funding by startup post flight funds. I think we're now at about $2.5 billion that the companies we work with have raised. We had 13 patents and 6 products, the most ever in a single year. We have 10,000 subscribers to our Upward magazine. And if you've never read the Upward magazine, I highly encourage everyone in here to download a copy. It's very much worth your while to read that. And we have 2,700 subscribers to a new podcast we've developed called Between a Rocket and a Hard Space. I think, Mark, you've been actually on that podcast. So here's the 5-year trend in projects selected. As you can see, we're on a downhill trend. But hopefully what we're doing is we're still picking good, high-value projects, taking advantage of the resources we have. I'm not going to go into that one in detail. This definitely shows you our 5-year trend in payloads delivered, which, you could argue it's increasing. I'd say we're holding steady, and it looks like about 100 payloads over the last 3 years is about a good number. Cumulative funding, I talked about that. We're at about $2.5 billion cumulative. So talking beyond 2025, Robin mentioned that we received an extension to the cooperative agreement. Ryan was sitting here in the front row. She said it only took a year. I can share with you, it was a lot of work on the part of the NASA team to get that extension done. And I'm very grateful to both the program office and to Robin for making that happen. We continue to work with NASA to fly as many payloads as we can. Future payloads, we're going to fly those using the RRF as the mechanism for accommodating that. Robbie said we might get some additional funding. Even if we ended up doing a solicitation, I'll be honest with you, I think there's a value of using one process for all the payloads, because I think the community will see it as more transparent. They'll understand the prioritization process. So I'd be highly, I don't see us reverting back to us having a separate system for ISSNL sponsored projects. We do expect to see some further reductions in staff over the next couple of years as the ISS, retirement approaches in 2030. We're going to stop, making awards of RRS at some point in time prior to 2030. Tentatively, that looks like 2028. So we've got a couple of years to go on that. And more importantly, I think what you're going to find, and this is where you as a community are important, we're going to have to continue to find ways to adjust, adapt, and innovate to changes in the environment. We got to find a way to assist the government with the transition of the national lab to whatever it is that follows, which is either a space research institute or a microgravity institute. Whatever it ends up being, we'll all have to work together to make that transition successful. And so with that, I've come to the end. I want to make clear to you that Mark mentioned that this is one of two public meetings we have. We're required to do one, but I think it's critically important to make ourselves as available to this community as we can. So as long as I can get the UAC chair to come up with me and share the opportunity of standing in front of the room, I think we'll continue to do two. But I'll share with you, it's, Mark talked about the need for advocacy. I truly believe that the effort that we expended last year, and, I want to thank the folks at BAHEP. There was a group in Huntsville that similarly put in a lot of effort. And then there were folks in this room who wrote op-eds that honestly move the needle on getting people to see the value of the work that's being done on ISS. And I don't see that ending. I think, if anything, we're going to have to get better at it. And what we really need to do is, instead of just holding the line on the budget, we got to find a way to bump it up a little bit so we can do a little bit more work before we retire the ISS. So with that, we've reached the point of questions. And Mark helped me. I've got a list of interesting questions here.
I did have a question on
Sure.
your previous chart.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
I can go back.
Because you talk about future payloads to be from RF, NIH, NSF, project obligations, and orbital edge. I think of those three, this room probably understands orbital edge the least.
Yeah. So let me tell you about orbital edge. So, and Sven, you're in the room. So Sven is our economic genius, understands the capital markets really, really well. And so several years ago, we had talked about part of what we wanted to be the future of the national lab was to be doing incubation and acceleration. Incubation's a little bit more difficult to do. You need facilities and you need a lot of people to do it. But we have, I think, how many? You got 300 venture companies in your network, Sven? So we have a very large group of venture capitalists who work in a network that Sven's created. And I felt like we had probably reached a point that we needed to, dip our toe in the water and see about running an accelerator. And given the fact that we were no longer being funded to do ISSNL sponsored projects, this provided another way of bringing money into the system so that researchers or technology developers could access funds to create new businesses which is, part of our charter, which is to help grow this low Earth orbit economy. So bring those funds into the system, given that we weren't going to be making awards with ISS and L funds. So we put out a solicitation. I think we received 157 concepts. Is that right?
Close to 200.
Close to 200. So an incredible response, which honestly, I think next to Igniting Innovation, that was the single largest response we ever had to a solicitation. So our team worked with the venture capitalists to, down select to 6 companies. And at some point in time, maybe we could have a webinar on who we actually selected, but a number of very, very interesting companies that, could potentially really contribute to the mission, this goal of creating a LEO economy. An organization that's doing, they've developed a method using nasal spray to cross the blood-brain barrier, which, for those of you who aren't aware, if you have any kind of a condition in your brain, very difficult to pass drugs across the blood-brain barrier. So this is really exciting possible treatments for, a number of different conditions. And then we have a company that's doing radiation protection with some advanced materials. So really, really interesting companies. All of them are new to space, right, Sven?
Mostly.
Yeah, mostly new to space. And so, we're hoping to do it again. We're hoping to maybe bring a little more money this time. And the good thing about it is our commercial service providers, they benefit because they end up doing the integration of these experiments that would fly to the ISS. So really, really a cool idea. It brought in more than $6 million of outside money, or no, $3 million of outside money into our system. And, it was a first time for us. So, we're looking to the end of the program, we're still trying to find ways to, use the asset, maybe do some different things, be creative, and hopefully move the needle a little bit.
Are there projects subject to the same part?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and that's going to be the important thing, is how well does the community accept this new prioritization process? Because the rubric we used to use of first in, first up, easy to understand. But I think given the fact that we have such a precious resource and a limited resource going forward, that we really need to take a hard look at it, make sure we were getting the right results. So, yeah. Okay, so now I get to answer a bunch of questions that were provided to Mark anonymously. And so what I'll do, I'll go down through these, and I think I'm going to ask some help on a couple of them. So the very first question: can you comment on rumors of extending ISS beyond the 2030 decommissioning date? So my first comment is, I had promised my spouse that I was going to retire in like 2031. So that's one comment. But no, I'm going to let Robin answer that. My personal opinion is, I think there's an appetite to making sure we have continuity of capability. And so I'm going to leave it at that. And with that, Robin, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I'll take that. Right now we're planning for station through 2030 with the deorbit vehicle doing its job and deorbiting the station after that. However, we do want to make sure we have continuity between ISS and follow-on CLDs. And So we're hoping we have CLD by then. If we don't, then I think the time frame that we're really going to have to make the call whether or not, if we don't want a gap in low Earth orbit, which we don't, and a lot of people are saying that, then we'll have to take a hard look at that, probably starting end of next year, no later than 27. And the reason for that is we have to, number one, start working with our international partners. And number two, we have to buy more flights. And we usually have to buy those flights about 3 years in advance. So we'll have to really take a look at how our CLD is progressing. What do we think the timeline for them is going to be? But we're not saying today we're going to extend station. You might hear some people running around saying that, and you might hear some, folks on the Hill. But as far as NASA's concerned, we're planning for 2030, but we also are planning for no gap.
Thank you.
You had mentioned to me a lot of discussion too.
Yeah. So Mark just reminded me, one of the things that we had suggested of doing was having a point counterpoint. Mark and I, as much as we get along, sometimes we don't agree on things. So I might try to get him to disagree with me on something here. No, but we definitely want more of a discussion. Yes. Yeah. So any thoughts on that? I mean, some of you work for companies that I know have a big interest in the commercial LEO destination. I think, honestly, it's critically important for the business model of the CLDs to have this continuity, because, what I'm hoping that we do as the national lab is, when I got to CASIS, we didn't have what we considered a full pipeline. Somehow in the 4 years since I've been there, the pipeline has gotten pretty full. And in fact, I'd say we have more demand than we have capability. And I think that's what's going to be needed to have these commercial LEO destinations be successful. And so, our reason for looking at things like these accelerators and other opportunities is, can we have a pipeline of several hundred projects that would just move over to these other platforms? That would help close the business case, I would have to believe. I mean, Scott, you want to comment on that? You were with Voyager.
I can. I think the business case we've kind of made for continuation of research on ISS to CLDs. Problem is, we need a decision from NASA on phase 2.
Yeah.
So who's going to be going forward? Who's going to be building? Who's going to be funded by NASA? Because the heavy investment is going to wait for that. I think the others would probably agree. Once we get that phase 2 award, whenever that happens, then you'll see everything sort of start to take off. A lot of metal getting bent. Then we'll know a real thing. Then you can start to look at ISS.
Totally agree. So, well, that's good. Okay, here's an interesting one. What would an extended lifespan look like, or how might CASIS adapt to an extended ISS lifespan? Well, I'll share with you that, we have our plans in place to retire the ISS. I'm just going to tell you. So from a workforce standpoint, we're looking at that. How do we document the files so that whoever picks up after we're done? So, how does it look? It looks like what Robin said. We need a decision. I think there's a decision that has to be made on the follow-on platform. And I think, just like everything else, we'll try to adapt the best we can to continue, what we're doing that adds value right up to the last possible date. So do I have a specific plan for that? No, but I'll share with you that here in the next year or two, I think we're going to know what that looks like, and we'll put that plan together. And it wouldn't be surprised if I asked Mark, or whoever Mark's I don't know if I can keep Mark that long. I really need to try to figure a way to keep Mark through my retirement date, but I don't think that's possible. Anyway, so don't have the specifics of what that would look like, but I would like to believe it would be very similar to what we're doing today, just on a extended timeline. Okay, let's see. My phone keeps turning off. What will happen to science that risks falling through a capability gap with CLDs? For example, live mouse experiments. So I don't want to necessarily get into rodent experiments unless Jen wants to talk about it. But just using that as an example, I think rodent experiments are really we might have done one more set of rodent experiments, but I think the community is moving to the tissue chips model versus using rodents. And so I think this whole what we're doing on station today and what we'll do in 5 years is going to continue to evolve. I mean, from when I started at Cases a little over 4 years ago to today, our portfolio looks a lot different, and I suspect it'll continue to evolve. So what is the role of Cases in transitioning organizational knowledge from the ISS to a CLD lab infrastructure? So I'll be honest with you. I think that's a conversation we have yet to have with NASA. Knowledge capture, critically important. What that knowledge capture looks like, that's the part we haven't really discussed. Obviously, we've got to pack everything up, close out all the agreements. All of that is pretty well understood. But I think the part that people are talking about here is, how do we avoid what I would call a restart? Because the first 10 plus years of this program probably weren't the smoothest. So how do we take advantage of what we've learned such that when we go to the new platform, we're not basically reinventing the wheel? So that's one thing. But I'd say more important, the business model, what the national lab or the research institute or whatever we call it looks like and what it does is going to be different in a CLD timeframe, because you're looking at a commercial platform, and I'm assuming we're looking at government provided transportation. And so, it's going to be different than what we do today. And there has to be a recognition that the commercial LEO destination gets probably the biggest vote on how things operate on their platform, right? And that said, I think how do we utilize the resources that government will be providing to make sure we maximize the use of those platforms? So I think knowledge capture is important, but I think there's also got to be an acknowledgement that what we do today isn't necessarily is going to work in that new model. So, any thoughts on that, Tara?
No, I don't disagree with what you said.
Yeah, it's I think it's going to be incredibly exciting. I think it's going to test everybody's resolve, because the CLDs are really going to be out there trying to figure out how to make the business work. And that's one of the things we're talking about on a follow-on accelerator. Could we create the opportunity for the companies that we select in the accelerator to do a B2B agreement with a platform independent of the national lab or NASA? I don't know. That would really be taking a step forward of trying to get it away from being a purely government funded activity. And so those are the kinds of opportunities I think we can take take some risk and do some experiments now and find out what works and doesn't work, which will help us in the CLD timeframe. So, and if you guys have thoughts on that, I'd be super interested in hearing them. Let's see what's on the rest of the questions. There's like 30 of them. How will the facilities dashboard be maintained? So that was something we developed, and it was actually developed by one of our staff. And the question is going to be really, we'll turn over a working facilities dashboard. Will the platform operators want to use that, or will they want to just model something based on that? And so happy to work with anybody that would like to look at how they can transition that capability. And I don't know that we cases or the national lab.
So I think one thing worth mentioning, Ray, is we will continue to maintain the dashboard as long as we're continuing to support new research projects. So, as facilities come and go, the dashboard will be updated to reflect that.
Okay. If a CSP proposes an international based RRF, how will that RRF be ranked against a US based RRF? How will ISSNL determine the priority between the two? So, so we get RRFs from our CSP community, who are all US companies. And sometimes they have a non-US PI. And there's a process for that. We work with NASA, and we have to get permission from the Office of International Affairs, basically, to say we can use the NASA allocation to support that. In general, I don't know. We may have had one or two projects that weren't approved. In general, I think NASA understands that those business relationships are critically important to the CSPs, and so they tend to get approved. They don't get a higher priority, but they don't get a lower priority either. And particularly, I think with the way the prioritization works, if a CSP says an international partner project is their highest priority project, then that would be their highest priority, right? So from our standpoint, we're not penalizing you, but we're also not giving you, anything extra because you're doing business with international partners.
Hey, could I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Jump in on, we had all these questions about CLDs and CSPs and transition. I feel like the UAC had become or could become a forum, an organization that could actually have an effect on that, or at least a voice. We've got this a few of the CLDs are members. All of the commercial service providers are eligible, and I think most are members. All of CSPs, users, customers, potential customers are represented. Even workforce development is represented. So the next 5 years, while everyone's scrambling to figure out what this looks like, is an opportunity for the UAC to
weigh in,
really be heard.
Yeah. And I'm sure Robin would appreciate hearing from you.
After the ISS, when you no longer need the UAC, we still have everybody, and an opportunity. So I see it as an opportunity for us to do even more and really affect the outcome even more significantly.
So Mark talked about me not needing a UAC. I think this kind of work is always going to require a user input into the whole process of how decisions are made. So I don't see the UAC per se being an entity that goes away when the national lab or the ISS is retired. I see it becoming the voice of the user in the commercial LEO destination time frame.
That's what
So
I'm saying.
yeah, so
You know, and well before then.
right,
Also.
it should be
Starting
now.
now.
Right. Yeah, I think we're in total.
So we have an opportunity if we want to grab it.
Got a question on workforce. What are the ways educational institutions can access ISS&L resources now and until decommissioning? So I can't provide we used to provide about $500,000 of funding annually to the STEM activities associated with work on ISS. We can still do a lot without that funding. I think we still do stories, and we don't do the stories anymore. So we need to be creative. I think there are things we can do. You know, and obviously, if there's a change in direction of the administration, then that would be another thing that the STEM committee could work on, is trying to advocate for a loosening of that.
So we do have some STEM programs that are still operating.
Yeah.
Those that weren't completely reliant on government funding to support them. So there's still a pathway for workforce development projects to be operating.
Yeah. And that's one of the things we can do. Workforce. I don't think we've been told we can't do workforce activities. So,
Hey,
and
Ray,
workforce. Yeah,
this
go ahead,
is-
Rob.
Ray, this is Lori. The other thing too,
Yeah.
we have a lot of STEM partners, like Alana Reyes on today, and I think Ted's in the audience. We have a lot of partners doing really good STEM work. So people that are interested can reach out to those partners, and we still have our partner page on our STEM partner page on our website.
Yeah. Okay. Is the ISS National Lab considering academic institution sponsored internships or fellowships? The only way I could do that is if we brought outside money in. And there may be a possibility of that. We got any media in the room? So we have a Margaritaville is selling some ISS related swag, and they're sending us a piece of the sales, and those would be non-NASA funds, and that might be a way to fund some student internships. So one other thing that I am doing is we have a number of donations that we've accumulated over the years where we've substantially completed work, but the gifts came with some restrictions. So we're going back to all the donors and seeing if they have any objections to us using it for things like workforce development. So we're working it, but I can't use NASA funds to fund any of that. So let's see.
You could use some unfunded internship.
So that's an interesting question. So the problem with unfunded, there's some legal considerations associated with that, because you still have responsibility of the awardee. And so I'm not against it, but we'll take another look at it. It's a fair question. So I didn't know you were there, Dr. Saban. Congratulations on your award. Yeah. How can we continue to inspire the next generation? I tell you, we got to work on inspiring the next generation. Necessary for space exploration in the absence of funding. So my point is, we're going to try to find other funding streams so that we can support some activities. We just don't have it yet.
Well, there was no STEM line in the NASA budget when we watched the Apollo landings.
No. But there was an administration, there was an also administration directive not to spend federal funds on it. So
No, but my point is,
yeah,
obvious, but kids are inspired by cool stuff.
yeah, no, I totally agree.
Get the word out, and they will be inspired to want to go do that.
Right.
Without a STEM line.
We need a Science is Cool campaign.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's, to some extent, that's where speaking engagements, people like yourself, Mark, go speak to a group of school-age children. Very inspirational, especially given that Mark is not only a space guy, but he's also a diver. So he can talk about all kinds of cool stuff. And I think that's what we're going to have to do as a community, is be more creative on what we can do to engage, young people. Go ahead, Jen.
Just a couple comments on
Yeah.
that. We are still continuing science communications. You guys
Yep.
have done an excellent job. So, we really could, use your help. I know a lot of you talk about the work that you do, to continue to talk about the research that we're doing on ISS. NASA is also continuing the Pathways program.
Yeah.
So we will be bringing in new employees
Yeah.
through that route, hopefully bringing the next generation of space research.
Yeah, and that actually brings up a good idea. It might be possible we could do a version of Upward that's maybe more tailored to young people.
I'd like to point out also that the new prioritization, what are we calling it? Scorecard?
Yeah.
Yeah, does include
A STEM
bonus
element.
point for workforce development.
How are you? Out of 100?
Go ahead.
Undergrad versus graduate versus high school interns.
Well, actually, you want to if you were to prioritize anything, you'd want to prioritize sixth graders. Okay, because that's when they make the decision, right? So there's a lot to be said for getting to them early. I don't know that I want to try to differentiate between a sixth grader and a grad student, because a sixth grader is probably more like a minor leaguer with maybe not quite so much proven potential. And a grad student is somebody that's already playing AA ball somewhere, and you have a better sense of where that's going. But I don't know that the national lab needs to be the person or the organization trying to say a sixth grader gets less priority than a grad student. So I would tell you, I put my money on the sixth graders, but that's just me. Go ahead.
Not speaking anyway on behalf of the science subcommittee, the UAC, but as an academic in aerospace engineering, we have far more students interested in aerospace engineering than ever before. Numbers are unbelievable. So if a student, if that's a sixth grader, is in a family that says, I have the money, or I'll find a way to send you to university, when they get there, lots of them want to study aerospace engineering.
Absolutely.
So, in terms of figures, we have something like 4 times as many aerospace side interests than just 10 years ago. So I don't think the situation for the United States future is bad in any way. I'm not talking either officially as UAC or on behalf of my university, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, but the future looks, I think, fantastic.
So I don't know what the numbers are now, but I recall when I was center director at NASA Glenn, that the number was we were graduating about 70,000 PhDs in engineering every year. And that compares to China at the time was graduating like 200,000. And so, I can't speak to what the number is now, but if it's even anywhere near that, we ain't graduating enough, right? So my point is, I think we need to figure a way to inspire the sixth graders, the high schoolers, the college students, the grad students, find opportunities. I mean, I look across the room, Scott, I know we sponsored some interns that went to Voyager this year, and we would have done it again, next year if we'd had the ability. I think we need to find a way to continue those kinds of efforts and, visit schools and inspire sixth graders to make a decision to go into a STEM field, because that'll help us in the long run. Go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, so I think the inspiration part is well within what Cases is capable of doing, but what you really need is you need follow.
Yep.
You need to apply, and that requires work.
Yeah.
And
I don't have the staff anymore.
Exactly. But one thing I think is good to mention is that Cases is a nonprofit. Right?
Yeah, send money.
Right. And so how do you reorient to the public that you can actually add funds into this program or workforce development, for example, so you get the nod from the administration and you get support from NASA. I think that's probably something you really need to leverage.
We've struggled with being able to raise charitable donations. I'm just going to say it flat out, because when you go to an organ, a foundation or whoever seeking funds for this kind of work, the first thing they look at and say, oh, you get an $8 million grant from the federal government every year. So it puts us in a completely, in a very defensive position, trying to make our case for why it's important. That said, I'm not saying we're quitting. And, honestly, this could be an area where the STEM committee could maybe help us put a strategy together on how to go raise more money to do exactly what you're talking
explicitly
about.
For workforce
Right, explicitly.
You go to the CLBs and everyone else and say, what kind of jobs do you need today and in the future?
Right.
And you build a program around that.
Yep.
But I think inspiration is a great start, but you do need to apply it.
And I do appreciate your comments.
Maybe just a follow up.
Yeah.
You have wonderful lines, number of patents. Great, people get it. Number of publications. I think a single line that says number of U.S. national who were supported as undergraduate research assistants, as master's degree that came out of these ISS or cases projects, and PhDs that came out of these projects. These had to all be national U.S. nationals. I can't have a student who's most visas, foreign visas, they can't be in my projects. So these are all U.S. nationals. Having a single line that says how many bachelors, masters, and PhDs you've helped produce, I think will have a big impact without getting anybody sensitive about, K through 12 or anything that is now a very sensitive subject.
Or actually, how many of those ended up with jobs in industry as a result of it?
But our placements is in the low 90%. So that's exactly. We have those figures.
Yeah, Amir, just following up on that, our quarterly and annual reports do report that. Since I think a year and a half ago, we started collecting that for all projects. Now we don't take that a step further in that, like the job placement part, that we don't have.
Francisco Cordova.
It's how many students were supported by different levels that is reported.
So good idea.
Very good idea. So there's a few more questions. I can try to go through those quickly. Let me see.
Ray, this is Lori. There is one in the chat. It really might be more for our NASA friends, but the question is, what is the impact of the service platform collapse in Bacanora last Thursday?
Oh, yeah, I'm going to let the NASA guys answer that one.
I figured we
Robin's ready to answer too. But go ahead.
Yeah. We have not heard from our Russian counterparts yet as to how long it will take to repair that launch location. It is the only one they have that goes to ISS. We do know that. So we're assessing the impacts definitely for 2026. We're going to need to launch all of our Russian partners' supplies that would have launched on Progress vehicle from the launch site. Don't panic, it's okay. I mean, so that being said, I don't know the full extent of the impacts. We also have direction from the program. We just talked about this yesterday in the SSPCB. Our first blush in is going to be to leave the research alone and see what we can do from spares, consumables, whatnot, before we start taking research off the flights. It's very, very well recognized. Obviously, we need that definitely from Dana, and she talks about it every time we talk this subject about how hard it has been on this community the last few years. And it's always a different reason, right? That something happens that we impact the man test, but she fully recognizes that it has happened. And like I said, first priority for at least this go around is research for 2026. More to come. We really do need to hear from our Russians. We don't have their assessment yet for how long they can be down. What else? Did that cover?
Well, I'm glad you answered that one. But, you know, I think that's why I said earlier that that while last year may have been a difficult year, I think it's probably more an indication of the kinds of things we're going to have to deal with. As you close down a program, things get more and more difficult. Let's just say it. And it's not that everybody isn't working their butts off. Everybody is working their butt off. But what I find amazing is, yeah, we have this difficulty, but we seem to find a way to come out on the other side and still contributing to, you know, getting things done. And that's what's important. If it was easy, they would find other people to do it. But it isn't easy, so that's why they're stuck with us. And but with that, that's pretty much it, unless there's some questions from here in the room. Like I said, go ahead.
First, I want to thank you as a scientist that worked on one of the experiments up there. It's really great what you provide for us, and it's real. Like, it's a pleasure to work with NASA teams and just with something so big and so nice. Maybe you won't like the next one.
It's all right.
Environmental impacts of like what these big projects, and is this some consideration that you have, like, reuse or manage that throughout the end?
So you're talking about the environmental impact of bringing the ISS back?
No, sending rockets.
Oh, so that's a whole that goes back to my old job back in the 2000s. So honestly, anytime a company like SpaceX or Rocket Labs or Northrop Grumman or whoever develops a project that includes a launch vehicle, there's an EIS that is done, and it looks at, you know, not only the effects on the environment of a single launch, but the cumulative effects over time, what happens if you have a bad day. And you know what I think you're seeing, and I think Blue is probably furthest down the line on this, as they're looking at you know, basically green boosters where they're not using as many hazardous chemicals on the propulsive end of it. And I think you're going to see that more and more, not just because of the environmental impact, but because it makes good business sense to use those kinds of materials. But we at the National Lab don't get involved in that. That's typically done by the commercial launch operators. And, you know, I suspect even for Artemis, there was one done. But separating Artemis out as a SpaceX, United Launch Alliance, Rocket Labs, Blue Origin, all of them do an EIS and have to get approval from the government to run their program. So, yeah. Is that it? With that, I hope everybody has a great conference. And see you next time.
Let's see. Let me just wrap it up for us. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you. Yeah, thanks to, I see Twyman joined us. Thanks for taking on your new role, Twyman. This is a new commercial service provider subcommittee chair over there. Thanks to everybody for all the really good and important work that you did this year, and thanks for coming today. Let's see.
Yeah.